The galaxy was vast, filled with thousands of civilizations, each older and more advanced than the last. Among them, humanity was still young. Their homeworld, Earth, had burned centuries ago in a catastrophe that many believed no one survived. The Council of Stars, an alliance of the greatest empires, considered humans a forgotten species, their history no more than a tragic tale whispered in archives. But in the shadows of forgotten space, humanity endured. They had carried the memory of Earth in their blood, the dream of survival in their hearts. They were not the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the most advanced. Yet they had one trait no other race could match, an unbreakable will to rise again. Captain. Mira Hayes stood at the command bridge of the starship Resolute. Her eyes, tired yet sharp, looked at the endless dark of space. She was a child of survivors, born on a drifting station far from the Council's reach. Her people had grown up on broken ships, repairing scraps, breathing recycled air, living on the edge of extinction. But they had learned one truth. No storm, no enemy, no fate could erase them if they stood together. As the Resolute drifted near the hyperspace gate, thousands of ships began to align around it. Freighters refitted as warships, mining barges armored with steel, medical ships carrying both soldiers and families. This was not a fleet built by empire, but by survival. Each vessel bore scars, some patched with mismatched hulls, others with engines that groaned from overuse. Yet each ship burned with the same fire. They were alive, and they had come this far together. The Council worlds had not seen humanity for generations. Many believed their kind too weak to return. The powerful races, the towering Veil, the brilliant crystalline Luthari, the warlike Kethari, mocked the idea that humans could ever rise again. To them, humanity was reckless, too emotional, too fragile. They forgot one thing. Humanity thrived not in safety, but in struggle. On the bridge, Mira's first officer, Jonah Rains, studied the fleet's status. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was steady. "All ships report ready, Captain. The engines are unstable, but they'll hold." He glanced at her, eyes carrying both fear and pride. Mira gave a faint smile. "They've held for years, Jonah. They'll hold a little longer." Beyond the gate lay the central systems of the Alliance. If humanity stepped through, they would reveal themselves to the entire galaxy. Some would call them traitors to survival, others would laugh at their rusted ships, but none would be able to ignore them. The fleet waited in silence. Children pressed, their faces against portholes, watching the stars shimmer. Old veterans gripped weapons worn by time, whispering to the memories of Earth. Mothers and fathers held each other tightly, knowing the moment ahead would decide everything. Mira closed, her eyes for a moment remembering her grandmother's voice. She had been a child when she first heard the stories of Earth, the oceans that stretched forever, the forests that sang with life, the cities that shone like fireflies. Her grandmother had said, "We carry Earth within us. As long as we live, Earth lives too." With a deep breath, Mira opened her eyes and spoke. "This is not the end of us. This is the beginning. They thought no one survived Earth's fall. Let us show them the truth." A signal pulsed through the fleet. Engines roared to life, glowing with a defiant blue light. The hyperspace gate flared, a storm of energy swirling like a living sun. And then, ship after ship leapt forward, bursting into the currents of hyperspace. The jump was chaos. Gravity bent, stars twisted into ribbons of light, and the hulls of the ships shook, as if the universe itself resisted their passage. Yet still, they held together. The fleet did not scatter, did not falter. They moved as one, bound by a promise forged through centuries of struggle. We will not break apart again. Moments later, the stars returned. The fleet emerged into council space, 1,000 ships blazing through the darkness, scarred but unbroken on. The nearby council world of Vale Prime, sensors screamed alarms. Alien commanders rushed to their stations, their eyes widening as the impossible appeared on their screens. "It cannot be," one whispered. "No human ship has been seen in centuries." But it was real. Humanity had come, not as ghosts, not as refugees, but as a fleet united. For a heartbeat, the galaxy stood in silence. And then, in that silence, something changed. The old races, who had long thought themselves unchallenged, looked upon the battered human fleet and felt something they had not known for centuries: uncertainty. Mira Hayes stood tall at the bridge, window, watching the council world grow larger ahead. Around her, the fleet burned bright against the void. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across every channel, to every human ship. "We are here, together." And in that moment, humanity returned to the galaxy, not forgotten, not broken, but unstoppable. The council chamber was a cathedral of stars. Floating light orbs cast a silver glow on the faces of alien leaders gathered in a vast circle. They had ruled the galaxy for centuries, believing themselves untouchable, their alliance eternal. Yet now every gaze was fixed on the central holoscreen where the impossible image played: a human fleet, scarred but whole, emerging from hyperspace together. A ripple of voices shook the hall. The crystalline Luthari's tones rang like glass. "This cannot be! Earth was destroyed! Their kind is extinct!" The massive Cathari general bared his scaled teeth. His deep voice rumbled like thunder. "If they have returned, it is not by strength. It is by desperation. They are fragile creatures clinging to wreckage. Do not mistake survival for power." But not all shared his confidence. The Elder Vale, towering beings of flowing silver. Skin whispered uneasily. "No empire has endured such loss and risen again. Perhaps we should listen before we judge." At that moment, the great doors opened. Every voice stilled. Captain Mira Hayes stepped forward, flanked by Jonah Rains and a small escort. She walked with calm dignity, her boots striking the polished floor like a steady drumbeat. Though dressed in the plain uniform of her fleet, there was an aura around her, a weight carried only by those who had looked into the abyss and returned. The aliens stared. She was so small compared to them, fragile in body, her skin pale against the luminous chamber, yet her eyes carried storms. Mira spoke, her voice clear and steady. "You said humanity was gone. You believed Earth's fire erased us, but we endured. We rebuilt in shadows, and now we stand before you, not as beggars, not as ghosts, but as survivors." Her words fell like stones into still water. The Luthari representative clicked in agitation, shards of light flashing across its crystalline form. "Survivors, yes, but reckless. You humans carry chaos wherever you go. Why should the Council risk stability for a species that was too weak to protect its own world?" Mira did not flinch. "Because weakness did not bring us here. Will did. When Earth burned, we did not surrender. We carried our dead, rebuilt from ruins, and taught our children that even in ashes, hope breathes. That is why we are here. That is why we survived." The chamber was silent again, heavy with the weight of her words. Yet skepticism still lingered. Jonah stepped forward then, his voice carrying quiet strength. "You call us reckless. Maybe we are. But when your worlds face storms, when your fleets collapse, it is that recklessness that becomes courage. It is that stubbornness that keeps us standing when logic says we should fall." The Cathari general leaned forward, scales catching the light. "Big words. But words will not save you. The rim is dying. A star there collapses faster than nature allows, threatening colonies across the border. We have studied it. We know the truth. No fleet can survive its storms. The council murmured in dread. The rim crisis had been whispered in corners, feared but never faced. Mira's gaze hardened. Then we will go. The hall erupted in disbelief. Madness, the Luthari shouted. Your fleet is battered, your technology primitive. You cannot fight a star. But Mira's voice rose above them all, calm but unshakable. You underestimate us because we are young. You mock us because we are flawed. But humanity has always faced the impossible. We do not run from fire, we walk into it together. And if the rim burns, we will be the ones to hold the line. The chamber fell into stunned silence. For the first time in centuries, the council did not know what to say. Outside the hall, as the humans returned to their ships, whispers spread like wildfire across the stations of the council. Ordinary citizens, alien and human alike, spoke the same words with awe and disbelief. They survived. They came back. They are going to fight the star. On board the Resolute, the crew prepared in grim silence. Engineers patched wounded hulls. Medics checked supplies, and soldiers sharpened weapons they knew might never be used. Children clung to their parents, sensing the weight of what was to come. Jonah walked the lower decks, speaking quietly to the people. He found them afraid, but not broken. They had lived in fear their entire lives. They had faced loss too many times to count. And yet when he asked, "Will you follow us into the storm?" every voice answered yes. On the command, bridge. Mira looked at the fleet through the viewing glass. Hundreds of ships, worn but unyielding, floated against the stars. Each one carried a piece of humanity's soul. Each one was a promise that Earth had not died in vain. Jonah joined her, his face pale but steady. "Do you think we can do it?" he asked quietly. Mira's hand tightened on the rail. Her voice was soft, but every word was iron. "I don't know, but I know this. If we fall together. And if we stand, the galaxy will never forget us." The hyperspace gate shimmered ahead, glowing with the light of the unknown. Engines powered up across the fleet, humming with defiance. The humans had chosen their path. They would march into the dying star, and in that decision, the galaxy trembled. The fleet drifted at the edge of the rim. Before them stretched a dying star, swollen and unstable, glowing with a furious light that pulsed like the heartbeat of a monster. Streams of plasma lashed out into space, tearing through nearby asteroids and swallowing them whole. The star was collapsing, its death rushing faster than nature allowed. The humans stared at the storm, their breath caught. No simulation could have prepared them for this sight. It was not just destruction. It was beauty mixed with terror, fire mixed with silence. It was a reminder of how small they truly were. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Mira Hayes studied the view with steady eyes. Around her, the crew worked in silence, their faces pale but determined. The star's light painted them in gold and red, as if warning them of what awaited. Jonah Rains stood beside her, scanning the readings on his console. "The energy output is beyond anything we've seen. The shock waves alone could tear the fleet apart if we drift too close. And those machines—" He stopped, his throat tight. Around the star, black shapes moved like shadows in fire. Ancient constructs, massive weapons built by an unknown hand, floated in precise patterns. They watched the intruders with silent menace, their glowing eyes, cold and unblinking. "Guardians," Mira whispered, "left behind to keep anyone from touching the star." The fleet's comm channel crackled. A nervous voice came through. Admiral Vaynar of the Cathari. His warship had followed at a distance, not to help, but to witness. "Human fleet," he growled. "You cannot survive this. Turn back before you waste your lives. The Council will—" "Not honor martyrs." Mira did not reply. She simply raised her hand, signaling her officers. The humans did not come here to ask permission. They came to fight the impossible. The fleet began its advance. Engines burned bright, carrying them into the storm. Shields flared against waves of plasma, hulls shuddered under the force of cosmic winds. The first Guardians awakened fully, their cores glowing with deadly power. Beams of searing energy ripped across the void. The humans did not scatter. They moved in formation, weaving through fire like dancers in chaos. The Resolute led the charge, smaller ships darting around it to draw enemy fire. Mining vessels, once humble machines of labor, now carried cannons welded from scrap. Cargo freighters had become shields for lighter ships, their bulk-absorbing hits meant to kill. Every loss was felt like a wound. A ship struck and vanished in flame, and the humans whispered its name on every channel. But even as they mourned, they pressed forward. Jonah's voice rang through the comms. "Remember, these machines follow patterns. Watch them. They cannot improvise." He was right. The Guardians attacked with precision, but their movements were predictable. Humans exploited those cracks, striking in moments of weakness, slipping through spaces no logical fleet would risk. A freighter broke formation, slamming its engines into full burn. It charged straight at a Guardian twice its size. "For Earth!" its captain shouted before impact. The explosion tore through the machine, leaving it broken in the void. The fleet roared in grief and triumph all at once. Mira clenched her fists. Every sacrifice carved a path forward. Every loss gave strength to those who remained. Hours passed like minutes. The star grew larger, its rage filling every screen, every thought. The fleet was scarred, many ships smoking, their systems failing. Yet still they advanced, holding formation as if bound by something greater than fear. At last, they reached the inner edge of the storm. There, Mira gave the final command. "Deploy the anchors." The experimental warp anchors, unstable devices, built from salvaged parts and forbidden theories, were released into space. One by one, they activated, glowing with a deep blue light. Chains of warped gravity linked them together, forming a fragile net across the star's fury. The plan was simple and impossible. Redirect the energy, bend it away from inhabited systems, force the storm to collapse in a controlled path. No other race dared attempt it. No other race believed it could work. As the anchors strained against the fire, the fleet formed a shield wall around them. Ships locked into place, holding the line against the Guardians. Every impact shook them to the core. Shields failed, hulls cracked, but still they stood. On the Resolute, alarms blared. Jonah shouted over the chaos. "The net won't hold much longer." Mira's voice was calm, steady as stone. "Then we hold it for as long as we can." Her words spread across every channel, carried to every ship, and the humans answered in unison. Together, the star screamed, its light flaring so bright it blinded sensors. Plasma storms ripped against the net, anchors shattered one by one. Yet every time one fell, a ship moved to cover the gap, sacrificing itself to keep the chain alive. It was madness. It was courage. It was humanity. Finally, the impossible happened. The net bent space itself, dragging the star's fury away, forcing the storm to break in a controlled wave. The shock burst outward, scattering Guardians, tearing them apart in the wake of redirected fire. The dying star collapsed into silence. When the light faded, the human fleet floated battered and broken, but alive. Across the galaxy, alien sensors recorded what they could not believe. Humanity had not only faced the storm, they had conquered it. On the bridge of the Resolute, Mira Hayes stood in silence. Around her, the crew wept, some in grief, some in joy, all in awe. Jonah's voice was a whisper. "We did it. We actually did it." Mira looked at the dying star one last time. Her voice was quiet, but carried the weight of every survivor, every soul who had ever believed Earth was gone. They said no one survived. They were wrong. The return to Council space was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships limped from hyperspace, their hulls scarred, their shields flickering. Some floated half-crippled, patched together with emergency welds. Others carried the silent weight of those who had fallen. Yet despite the damage, despite the losses, they had returned together. A battered fleet, yes, but a living fleet. On every channel across the Alliance, reports spread like wildfire. The humans survived the Rim Star. The humans redirected its death wave. The humans stood where no one else dared. For ordinary citizens across alien worlds, disbelief turned to awe. Crowds gathered at holoscreens, whispering the name of a species once thought extinct. Children pointed at the images of human ships with wide eyes. On distant colonies, saved by the deflected storm, survivors wept openly, whispering thanks to strangers they had never met. But within the council chamber, awe did not come so easily. The leaders of the great races gathered once more, their voices sharp, their pride wounded. The crystalline Luthari sparkled with agitation, their forms shivering with shards of light. They meddle in forces they do not understand. This victory was luck, nothing more. Had the net failed, entire sectors would have been destroyed. The Cathari general slammed a clawed hand on the table, his scales bristling. Luck? No. Stubbornness. Madness. They threw themselves at the fire like fools, and by some accident survived. Do not mistake recklessness for strength, but... The Veil Elder, whose silver form shimmered with calm, spoke softly. Yet they succeeded where none of us dared to try. That is not an accident. That is will. The chamber fell quiet at those words. None could deny the truth. The Rim was saved, and it was the humans who had saved it. The doors opened. Captain. Mira Hayes entered, flanked once more by Jonah Rains and her small escort. The chamber's light reflected on her worn uniform, the burns on her sleeves, the exhaustion on her face. Yet she walked with unshaken dignity, her gaze fixed forward, every eye turned to her. Some were filled with suspicion, others with anger, but many now carried something new. Respect. Mira stood at the center of the chamber. She did not bow. She did not kneel. Her voice was steady, carrying the quiet strength of one who had already stood in the heart of a star. You thought us gone, she began. You thought Earth's fire erased us. You said no one could survive. But we survived. You said no one could face the Rim storm, but we faced it. You said no one could hold the line, but we held it. And we did it not for glory, not for conquest, but because lives were at stake. Because when others fled, we refused to turn away. Her words cut through the silence like a blade. The Luthari delegate hissed in outrage. You defy the council with your arrogance. You risked all worlds by tampering with powers beyond your reach. How many more storms will you unleash with your recklessness? Mira's eyes hardened. We unleashed nothing. We faced what was already there. When danger comes, hiding will not save you. Only courage will. Jonah stepped forward then, his voice quieter but no less firm. You call us reckless because we act. You call us fragile because we bleed. But when the storms come, when the machines awaken, when the impossible rises, who else will stand if not us? The chamber rippled with unease. Some delegates shifted, uncomfortable. Some glared with silent fury, but others, quietly, nodded. From the back rows, a smaller voice spoke, the representative of a frontier species long ignored by the great powers. Their people had nearly been lost to the Rim storm. Tears glimmered in their eyes as they rose. Our world was saved, not by the council, not by the great fleets, by them. They pointed at Mira. By the humans. The chamber trembled with murmurs. For the first time, the voices of the lesser races rose together, speaking of how humanity had done what no empire dared. Whispers spread, weaving into a single truth. Perhaps these fragile creatures carried something the galaxy had forgotten. The Cathari general growled in anger, but even his gaze wavered. You risk the balance of power. You threaten the order we have built for centuries. Mira's voice was quiet, but each word carried weight. We do not seek to threaten. We do not seek to rule. We seek only to stand as equals, to prove that no species, no matter how small or broken, should be silenced. If survival makes you fear us, then you fear your own weakness, not ours. Silence. Heavy. Lasting. At length, the Veil Elder rose. Their silver form shimmered in the dim light. Perhaps we have been blind. Perhaps strength is not in age or technology, but in the refusal to fall. Humanity has shown us this. I say, they have earned their place, not as shadows of a dead world, but as a people reborn. The chamber split in uproar, some voices rising in support, others in rage. The council's unity trembled, but beneath the chaos, something undeniable stirred. Humanity was no longer a forgotten ghost. They were here, and the galaxy would have to face them. As Mira and her escort left the chamber, Jonah leaned close, whispering, "Do you think they'll ever truly accept us?" Mira's gaze stayed forward, her eyes steady as the stars. Maybe not, but they will never ignore us again. Outside, the human fleet floated in orbit, 1,000 scarred ships gleaming against the black. Ordinary people across the galaxy looked up at the images and felt a new fire kindling in their hearts. For the first time in centuries, hope wore a human face. The days following the council meeting were filled with unrest. Across the galaxy, voices rose, some praising humanity as saviors, others warning that they were a threat to the balance of power. Entire colonies held vigils for the ships that had been lost in the Rim storm. In markets, in streets, in the whispers of crowded stations, the same words repeated again and again. The humans are back. But within the halls of power, admiration quickly turned to fear. The Luthari feared that humanity's recklessness would shatter the fragile peace. The Cathari worried that a people so stubborn could not be controlled. Even among the Veil, who had spoken in support, doubt simmered quietly. For centuries, the council had ruled without challenge. Now, a species once thought extinct had proven that the impossible could be done, and that frightened those who thrived on order. In shadowed rooms, whispers became plans. The Cathari general, his scales glinting in low light, spoke in a voice thick with disdain. They think themselves heroes, but they are a spark in dry wood. If we let them grow, they will set fire to everything we built. The Luthari delegate, shimmering like fractured glass, responded coldly. Then we extinguish the spark before it spreads. And so a plan was born, not to face humanity openly, but to break them quietly. Far above a council world, the human flagship Resolute orbited in silence. Its hull still bore scars from the Rim storm, but its crew worked tirelessly to keep it alive. Inside, Captain Mira Hayes stood before her officers, studying the reports that streamed in from across the fleet. Supplies were running low, engines strained from overuse. Families whispered of rest, of rebuilding. Yet Mira knew that their return had only just begun. The council would not simply welcome them with open arms. Power did not yield so easily. Jonah Rains entered the briefing room, his face tight with unease. He carried a data pad, but his eyes spoke before his words did. There's been an attack. The room stilled. Where? Mira asked. On our outpost near Vega's Reach, the one we set up for resupply. The attackers left no survivors. Jonah's voice broke slightly, though he forced it steady. The council claims it was raiders, but he slid the data pad across the table. These were not raiders. The weapons used were council grade. Mira's chest tightened. She read the report in silence. The melted hulls, the precision strikes, the evidence buried but not erased. It was too clean, too deliberate. A message. "They want to break us before we rise," she murmured. Jonah nodded grimly. "And they think we'll retreat, that we'll scatter into the dark again." For a long moment the room was silent. Officers shifted, their eyes heavy with anger and grief. Some whispered names of the lost. Others clenched their fists, the fire of defiance rising once more. Mira lifted her gaze, her voice low but firm. "We buried Earth. We buried our families. We buried whole generations in silence. If they think another grave will make us run, they have forgotten who we are." Her words ignited the room. Fear turned into steel. Grief turned into resolve. That night, Mira walked alone through the corridors of the Resolute. The ship hummed with the quiet sounds of life. Children laughing softly, engineers repairing panels, medics tending to the weary. Every corner of the vessel carried stories of loss and survival. She paused at a small memorial wall where names of the fallen were etched into metal. New names had been added from the Vega outpost. Mira touched the cold surface, her throat tightening. How many more, she thought. How many graves before they understand? Jonah found her there, his steps quiet. He stood beside her, his voice gentle. "You can't carry all of them, Mira." Her eyes stayed on the names. "I don't carry them. They carry me. Every time we stand, it's because of them." Jonah's silence was heavy, but his eyes softened with respect. The next day, the humans gathered their fleet once more. They could not confront the council directly, not yet. But they would not sit idle while their people were hunted. Mira ordered the fleet into deep patrol, moving along the edges of council space where shadows and whispers hid truths. And soon, they found what they were looking for. A convoy of warships, marked with the sigils of neutrality, moved through a desolate sector. At first glance, they seemed harmless, supply carriers on routine patrol. But their engines bore the same heat signatures as those that had destroyed the Vega outpost. Jonah's voice was sharp with anger. "That's them." The fleet's officers looked to Mira. She stood tall, her eyes burning with quiet fire. "Then we show them we are not shadows. We are not ghosts. We are the fire they fear." With a single command, the humans struck. Their battered ships surged forward, engines roaring. They moved with speed born not of superior technology, but of desperation and unity. Where the Council's ships followed rigid formations, the humans adapted in chaos, turning mining lasers into weapons, cargo pods into decoys, medical frigates into shields. The Council's warships fired with precision, but the humans fought with unpredictability. Every strike was reckless, yet every strike cut deeper. They fought not for conquest, not for pride, but for the right to exist. And when the last council ship fell in flames, silence filled the void. The human fleet floated scarred but victorious once more. Jonah's voice broke through the comms. "They'll call us rebels now, traitors." Mira's reply was steady, her words heavy with truth. "Let them call us what they will. We do not fight for their approval. We fight to live." Far away in the shadows of the council chambers, the conspirators seethed at the news. Their plan had not ended humanity. It had awakened them, and across the stars, the whisper grew louder. "The humans will not kneel. They will not vanish. They rise." The galaxy trembled with rumors. Humanity's fleet had defied the Council's hidden strike and emerged victorious. To some, they were saviors. To others, they were a spark of rebellion. But in the grand halls of power, fear twisted into anger. Luthari Delegate's crystal body glowed with sharp light. "They are dangerous. First the rim storm, then defiance in open space. If we allow them to grow, their example will inspire others. The smaller worlds already whisper of following them. The Cathari general's scaled fist struck the table. Then enough whispers. Let us end them fully. We gather the fleets. We crush their ships. We erase this myth of resilience before it spreads like fire. Some voices hesitated. The Vale elder spoke with calm, but unease rippled in their tone. To destroy them openly is to reveal our fear. And what if we fail? Twice already they have survived the impossible. But the others had made their choice. A resolution was drafted in shadows. Humanity would be branded as rebels, as destabilizers of peace. Their fleets would be hunted, their allies silenced, their name cursed across the stars. On the Resolute, Captain Mira Hayes studied the reports streaming in. Council broadcast declared humans a rogue species. Images of their fleet were twisted into propaganda, wreckers of peace, reckless outlaws who endangered all. Colonies that had once praised them now hesitated, afraid of punishment. Jonah Rains slammed a datapad onto the table. They paint us as criminals, Mira. Criminals! After we saved half their worlds. Around the briefing room, the officers' faces burned with anger and betrayal. Some pounded fists, others whispered curses. A young pilot's voice cracked. Why do they hate us so much? Mira remained silent for a long moment. She gazed at the stars beyond the window, her voice low and steady when she spoke. Because we remind them of what they have forgotten. We remind them of courage, of unity, of rising even when the world falls apart, and that terrifies them. Her words struck deep. The crew fell silent, their grief turning into resolve. Soon, the storm broke. Council fleets emerged from hyperspace across sectors where humans hid. Sleek warships of crystal, of living metal, of scaled designs older than Earth itself, spread across the void. Their combined power was unmatched, their numbers overwhelming. One by one, human outposts reported being surrounded. Supply lines were cut. Allies too weak to resist abandoned them, choosing silence over destruction. The human fleet was cornered. On the command deck of the Resolute, alarms blared as reports flooded in. Multiple fleets inbound. They've blocked every escape route. Jonah turned to Mira, his face pale. They mean to end us here. Mira's gaze swept across her crew. Fear filled the air, but beneath it burned a quiet fire. She stood tall, her voice calm. Then we stand. We have faced storms greater than fleets. We are still here, and we will not fall in silence. The battle began like thunder. Council warships unleashed storms of firepower, beams of impossible precision that tore through the void. Human shields flared and cracked. Entire vessels shuddered under the weight of the first assault. Yet humanity did not scatter. They fought as they always had, not with superior power, but with heart, with unpredictability. Cargo ships dove between war cruisers, mining lasers slicing. Weak points. Medical frigates became shields for the smallest craft. Damaged ships rammed enemy hulls, explosions tearing gaps in the Council's wall. The comm channels overflowed with voices, fear, courage, love. Parents saying goodbye, pilots singing as they charged, officers whispering prayers into the storm. Every word was human. Every word was alive. Jonah's voice cut through the chaos. Mira, we can't hold much longer. Mira gritted her teeth, her mind racing. Logic said they were finished. Numbers said they could not win. But humanity had never lived by numbers. Her eyes fell on the star charts, on the hidden nebula nearby. An idea sparked. A desperate, reckless plan. Order the fleet into the nebula, she commanded. Jonah's eyes widened. The ion storms. In there we'll tear our systems apart. Mira's voice was steel. "It will tear theirs apart too, but only we know how to fight blind." The humans obeyed. Their fleet dove into the nebula, vanishing into clouds of burning gas. Lightning storms crackled, sensors failed, guidance systems collapsed. The Council ships hesitated, their formations breaking as their perfect order turned to confusion. Inside the storm, the humans moved like shadows. They used instinct, memory, and trust. Pilots guided each other with voices, not computers. Captains lit false beacons, luring enemy ships into dead zones. Engineers rerouted power through sheer will. The Council, blinded and broken in formation, faltered. Human ships struck from nowhere, vanishing again into the clouds. The hunters became the hunted. For hours, chaos raged. Ships on both sides vanished in fire. Screams echoed through comms, followed by silence. Yet the humans held together, bound not by technology, but by unity. At last, when the nebula cleared, both fleets were torn and bloodied, but the humans still floated, scarred, scattered, but alive. The Council had not crushed them. On the bridge of the Resolute, silence fell as the last echoes of battle faded. Crew members wept openly, some from grief, some from relief. Jonah's hands trembled as he whispered, "We survived again, somehow." Mira looked at her crew, her heart heavy, but proud, not somehow together. Her words carried through the fleet, across every battered ship. And in that moment, every survivor knew, even hunted, even betrayed, humanity would not vanish. They had turned against the Council itself, and lived. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, whispers spread louder than ever. The humans cannot be erased. They cannot be broken. They rise. The nebula battle became a legend whispered in hidden channels. The Council declared victory, but the truth spread quietly. Humanity still lived. Their fleet had not been destroyed. Their spirit had not been broken. And that truth was more dangerous than any weapon. In the deep corridors of the Resolute, Captain Mira Hayes walked among her crew. Every face carried scars, burns, bandages, exhaustion, but also an unshaken fire. They had bled together, and they had endured together. Mira stopped at the medical bay where children from the refugee ships slept side by side. She brushed a strand of hair from a little girl's face and whispered to herself, "This is why we fight. Not for revenge, for tomorrow." Yet tomorrow was uncertain. Supplies were low, ships were fractured, and every hyperspace lane they tried to take was blocked. The Council had turned the galaxy into a cage. Jonah Rains entered the bay quietly. His uniform was torn, his voice weary. "The scouts returned. 3 more colonies closed their doors to us. They're too afraid of the Council." Mira's jaw tightened. Fear has always been the Council's greatest weapon. But fear does not last forever. Jonah studied her face, seeing the weight she carried. "What if it does, Mira? What if we are all that's left?" Mira looked back at the sleeping children. Her voice was soft, but sharp with resolve. "Then all that's left will be enough." Far away, in the heart of the Council's grand chamber, chaos was brewing. The leaders of 100 species gathered, their voices a storm. "They cannot be allowed to continue," shouted the Cathari. General, his scaled hands pounding the stone floor. "The humans must be destroyed before their defiance spreads further." But not every voice agreed. The Veil Elder rose slowly, their silver eyes glowing. "We struck them with overwhelming force, and yet they survived. Ask yourselves why. Do we fight a small species, or do we fight a spirit we no longer understand?" The chamber erupted again, some demanding extermination, others urging caution. And through it all, whispers grew. Small worlds began to wonder if perhaps the humans were right, if perhaps the Council's rule was not strength, but fear. On the Resolute, a new signal arrived. It was faint, fragmented and buried beneath layers of interference. Engineers worked for hours to decode it. Finally, an image flickered across. The bridge, a being cloaked in light, their face hidden, their voice echoing. "I am Elira, from the world of Thalon. We once swore loyalty to the Council, but now we see their truth. We see what you endure, and we choose differently. Humanity, you are not alone." Gasps filled the bridge. Jonah's eyes widened. An ally? After all this? Mira's hand gripped the console, her chest tight. No, not just an ally. A beginning. The message spread through the fleet. Hope, fragile but burning, returned to weary hearts. Humanity had fought alone for so long, but now a spark had been lit in the galaxy. That night, silence filled the ship. Mira stood alone in her quarters, gazing at the stars. Her reflection in the glass looked older than her years, burdened by decisions. She thought of Earth, the oceans, the forests, the cities that once stood proud. She thought of the billions, lost when their home fell. "They said we were finished," she whispered. "But we are still here. And as long as we breathe, Earth breathes too." Jonah entered quietly, carrying a small device. "I found this in the wreckage of the refugee ships," he said. "It's old, but it plays music." He set it down, and a soft melody filled the room. A song from Earth, carrying echoes of laughter, of love, of home. Mira closed her eyes, and for a moment the war disappeared. For a moment, they were simply human. The next day, the Council struck again. A massive fleet appeared on the edge of the Darren system, where the human survivors had hidden. Ships of every shape filled the void, their weapons glowing like suns. The Resolute shook as alarms screamed. "Council broadcast incoming!" the calm officer shouted. The screen lit up with the stern face of the Luthari delegate, crystalline body shining with cold fire. "This is your end, humans. Surrender now, and perhaps your young will be spared. Resist, and you will be erased." Every crew member turned to Mira. The weight of the galaxy pressed upon her shoulders. She stepped forward, her voice clear, her eyes blazing. "We do not surrender. We are humanity. We are survivors of Earth. We are the children of storms, and we do not vanish. We rise." Her words echoed through the fleet, carried on every comm, reaching every soldier, every child, every survivor. Fear turned into courage. Silence turned into song. The humans answered with one voice. "We rise." The battle that followed was like no other. The Council's weapons tore through space, carving fire into the darkness. Human ships burned, but still they fought. They used every trick, every scrap, every ounce of courage. Damaged vessels rammed. Enemy cruisers. Pilots laughed through tears as they dove into impossible odds. Engineers welded with their bare hands to keep power flowing, and slowly, impossibly, the Council began to falter, because they fought with numbers. But humanity fought with heart. At the height of the chaos, when all seemed lost, a new fleet appeared on the horizon. Ships bearing the mark of Thalon, glowing with defiance. Elira's voice filled the comms. "To humanity, who reminded us of courage, we fight beside you." The galaxy shifted in that instant. For the first time, humanity was not alone. Together, they pushed back. When silence finally returned, the stars were littered with wreckage. Both sides were broken, but the humans still lived. And now, so did their allies. On the bridge, Jonah leaned against the console, breathless, trembling. "We should be dead, Mira. We should have been finished." Mira's gaze swept over her. Crew, scarred, but alive. She whispered almost to herself, "But we are not. We never are." And far beyond, across countless worlds, whispers spread like wildfire. The humans fight not for conquest, but for hope. They fight for tomorrow. And maybe we should too. The battle in the Darren system had ended, but the war was far from over. The humans and their new allies drifted among the ruins of shattered ships, tending to the wounded, gathering the lost, and burying their dead. Space was silent except for the faint echoes of broken hulls and fading engines. Captain Mira Hayes stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her uniform torn, her eyes heavy with grief. So many had been lost, yet she felt something powerful beneath the sorrow. It was not only survival, it was the birth of something greater. Humanity had stood against the Council, and others had joined them. Jonah Rains leaned against the console, his voice quiet. "We should be mourning, Mira, but all I feel is fire. They thought we would kneel. Instead, we are not only standing, we are pulling others to their feet." Mira turned to him. "That fire is what they fear most. Not our ships, not our weapons, our will. They can break fleets, but they cannot break this." Across the stars, messages began to spread. Hidden colonies sent whispers of support. Worlds long silent under the Council's rule began to stir. A single flame had lit the dark, and more sparks rose in answer. In the Council chamber, panic grew like a storm. Delegates shouted over each other, their voices filled with anger and fear. "The humans are dangerous. Their courage is a plague, spreading through every weak world." One roared, another slammed a fist on the table. "They were supposed to be finished. We burned their planet, scattered their people, erased their history." But Elira of Thalen, who had broken away from the Council, appeared on the central holoscreen. Their silver eyes glowed with calm fury. "You thought destruction would erase them. Instead, it forged them. You thought fear would silence them. Instead, it gave them a voice. Humanity has taught us all something you have long forgotten: freedom." The chamber shook with outrage, but Elira's words were already spreading across the galaxy. More voices rose in rebellion. For the first time in centuries, the Council's grip trembled. On board the Resolute, Mira gathered her crew and allies in the main hall. Soldiers, engineers, children, refugees, they stood shoulder to shoulder. The room carried the smell of burned metal and healing wounds. Mira's voice carried through the silence. "They called us broken. They said Earth's fall was our end. But look around you. We are not the end. We are the beginning. Humanity fights not because we are stronger, but because we refuse to give up. And now the galaxy has seen it. We are no longer alone." The crowd erupted, voices blending into a single cry that shook the walls. Jonah felt his chest tighten, pride and sorrow tangled together. For so long, they had fought only to survive. Now, they fought to lead, yet the struggle was far from simple. Supplies ran thin. Many ships were damaged beyond repair. Entire families had been lost in the last battle. And even with new allies, the Council's power remained vast. They would not let rebellion spread without unleashing their fury. One night, Mira sat alone in her quarters, staring at an old recording, a hologram of Earth's oceans, waves rising, and falling under a golden sun. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "We will never see you again, but we will carry you with us." Jonah entered quietly, placing a small piece of wreckage on the table. It was a fragment of Earth's flag, saved from a refugee vessel. "We may not have our home," he said softly, "but we still have our spirit, and that cannot be taken." Mira touched the burned cloth and nodded. "Then that spirit will guide the galaxy." Weeks later, the humans and their allies struck again, not with overwhelming fleets, but with strategy and courage. They targeted supply lines, freed enslaved colonies, and inspired uprisings on worlds once silent. Every victory was small, but together they formed something unstoppable, Across the galaxy, beings began to whisper a phrase once spoken only by humans. We rise. Children painted it on walls. Soldiers shouted it before battle. Refugees clung to it as a promise. The words spread faster than any ship, faster than any weapon. The council tried to silence it, but the harder they tried, the louder it grew. But deep in the shadows, beyond the council's sight, a new threat stirred. Something older than their laws, older even than the stars humanity had fled to. Ancient signals flickered at the edge of known space, patterns no one understood. Elira warned Mira of it one night over. A secret channel. The council is not the only danger. There are things sleeping in the dark, waiting for weakness. If we tear the galaxy apart, they may awaken. Mira listened carefully, her heart heavy. Humanity had fought so hard to prove itself, but the war might only be the beginning. Still, she answered with steady resolve. Then we will face them too, because humanity has learned one truth above all. No matter the enemy, no matter the darkness, we endure. On the eve of another battle, Jonah stood beside Mira on the observation deck. Stars glittered ahead like 1,000 promises. "Do you ever wonder," Jonah asked softly, "if we were meant to survive Earth's fall? If somehow we were chosen for this?" Mira shook her head. "Not chosen. Tested. And we passed. We pass every day. We refuse to surrender." Below them, the fleet's engines flared to life, scarred ships flying side by side. Not broken, but unyielding. Not erased, but reborn. For the first time, the galaxy no longer saw humanity as a ghost of a lost world. They saw them as a spark strong enough to ignite a fire across the stars. The galaxy trembled on the edge of chaos. The Council's empire was cracking, rebellions rising like fire on dry grass. Humanity had become the spark, but now a shadow far greater than the Council revealed itself. From the cold edges of space, the ancient signals grew stronger. They came from the Oblivion Swarm, a forgotten race older than the Council, a force that consumed entire star systems in silence. They were not political rulers or conquerors. They were survival itself, spreading, like a storm of black ships and living machines. No voice, no negotiation, only endless hunger. The Council panicked. Their fleets faltered, their worlds unprepared. Many leaders cried out for surrender, offering themselves as slaves. But in the center of the storm, humanity stood tall. Captain. Mira Hayes faced her crew on the Resolute, the same ship that had carried them through Earth's fall, through betrayal, through endless battles. Her voice was calm, though her heart raced with fear. "Once again," she said, "they say we cannot survive. Once again they say we will be the first to fall. But they forget what it means to be human. We have lived through fire, through exile, through the death of our own world, and still we rise. If the swarm wants the galaxy, they will have to tear it from our hands. We fight, not only for ourselves, but for every world that dreams of freedom." The hall filled with voices, cheers rising, tears in eyes. Humanity had been underestimated too many times. No more. The battle began in the Elara system, where stars burned golden against the dark. The swarm arrived like a tide of black wings, endless, unstoppable. The Council fleets tried to resist, but their formations crumbled. Discipline failed. Fear spread faster than any weapon. But the human fleet did not break. Scarred ships flew, in tight formation, weaving between the swarm's colossal machines. They fought not with superior numbers, but with creativity, improvisation, and raw determination. Jonah Rains, now commander of a smaller strike wing, shouted through comms, "We're going to cut their heart out! Follow me!" His voice carried, the fire of every soldier who had lost a home. Against all odds, they pierced deep into the swarm's massive structure. Human engineers discovered what no one else had noticed. The swarm moved as one because of a living core, a mind that pulsed, like a beating heart in the void. Destroy it, and the endless tide would falter. Where the Council had seen terror, humanity saw weakness. The attack was brutal. Ships burned, friends were lost, but the humans pushed forward. Mira guided the Resolute through collapsing debris, her hands steady, her eyes fixed on the impossible. When they reached the core, it shimmered like a black sun, alive with voices that were not words but endless hunger. Many felt despair. Some wanted to turn back, but Mira's voice cut through the fear. "Remember Earth," she said softly. "Remember the oceans, the forests, the sky. Remember the children who still dream of those things. That is why we fight, not because we are fearless, but because we carry hope even in fear." Every soldier felt it, every heart beat as one. They were not fighting as scattered survivors anymore. They were fighting as humanity. Jonah's strike wing dove first, sacrificing their ships to break the swarm's defenses. One by one, they fell, but their sacrifice carved a path. Mira guided the Resolute straight into the storm. The ship shook. Alarms screamed, but they did not stop. In the final moment, Mira ordered the engines to overload, driving all power into a single, blinding strike. The Resolute rammed into the core. Light burst like a star being born. The swarm screamed, their endless unity shattering into chaos. Across the galaxy, their fleets broke apart, no longer bound by the living mind that held them together. For the first time, the swarm was not infinite. For the first time, they could be beaten. Silence fell after the explosion, where the swarm had been endless. Now there was only wreckage drifting among the stars. The Resolute was gone, sacrificed to save them all. Mira Hayes had given everything, but her voice remained in the hearts of all who had heard her. Jonah, bloodied but alive, whispered on an open channel, "She was right. Humanity is not just survival. Humanity is hope." All across the galaxy, those words spread. Worlds enslaved by the Council rose. Alien races once divided stood together. The swarm's defeat was not only a victory of weapons, it was a victory of spirit. Years later, children on distant planets would ask who had saved them when the stars went dark. The answer was always the same. It was not the strongest. It was not the oldest. It was not the richest. It was humanity. A people who had lost their own world, but never their will. A people who fought with courage when others surrendered. A people who rose again and again, no matter how many times the universe tried to erase them. On the edge of the galaxy, a new fleet gathered. Not human alone, but a union of many species, reborn, free, unafraid, and at the center of it, painted. On every hull were two simple words: "We rise." The stars shone brighter, as if even the universe itself was watching. For the first time in history, the galaxy understood a truth that could never again be forgotten.